So, welcome to Yes and.
I'm excited.
It's just because she gets to correct me. Or so she thinks. We're going to take your questions, and I've seen this done in a lot of different Unity churches I've gone to, and DeeAnn and I are really clear. Like when I went to school, and she's still in it, it's like, okay, you get the questions in advance, and you choose the ones you're going to answer, and we're like, no, bring it on, bring it on. So we will take any questions, and we promise to respond, not answer the question. So you will get words out of our mouth. And
That's not that hard, right?
right, for us. But what I want to just be really clear on is what we're answering today is your spiritual questions, right? So your questions of what does Unity teach about this, or what is going on in the world, and how does that fit into our teachings? What do we think about the nature of humanity, the nature of God, all those kind of questions, and we'll take that. If there's specific questions about the building and about the structure of this organization, you're welcome to ask those questions at the forum after today's service. But we answer in this venue, in this service, spiritual questions. So let's take another moment to pray, to let the questions come up, right? Because we may be surprised when we listen for really what's on our heart. So I invite you to take a deep breath and go inside to allow that still, quiet voice to speak to you, that still, quiet voice to know the truth of what is up for you. Go to a place where you're in some confusion or doubt, questioning. Remember that time. Remember that place. And allow yourself to ask from there. Knowing that the questions of our mind come up so that the wisdom of our heart can respond. We give thanks. We find the courage. And we seek the answer. From this place of knowing, of asking, and receiving, we enter this communion of spirit. And we say, I am so grateful. And so it is.
So it is.
So when you have a question, we're going to ask that you ask it into the microphone for all of our visitors on live stream so that they can hear it as well, and that everyone here in this room. And Tyler's going to run the mic for us. So thank you, mister. Thank you. So anyone have a question? I think I see a hand over here. So I'll let Tyler. Great.
So my question has to do with the fact that today is St. Patrick's Day, and what is the Unity position with regard to saints and angels and intermediaries? My dad always believed that St. Christopher would help you find things, and Mary, pray for me. Mm-hmm. To me, I have trouble with that because it feels like dualism.
Yeah. So your father would pray to St. Christopher to help him find things. So did St. Christopher, I'm going to ask you as a question, do you think St. Christopher actually came down and helped him?
No.
Okay.
Not anymore, but back then I did.
Back then you did. So if St. Christopher did, what would he look like?
He was white, and he had a beard, and he wore white robes.
Sort of looks like you.
I'm much better looking than St. Christopher.
The modern St. Christopher. So Unity's position is that when we are, there is no wrong way to pray. We do have a very specific way to pray, right? We have affirmative prayer, which DeeAnn just got finished teaching a whole course on. But if someone prays for help from a saint, what they're doing is calling on their higher consciousness, the St. Christopher of them. That's why I made the joke that it looked like you. So that white man with the beard and the stole comes down to help you in that moment. That comes down from your consciousness, not anywhere else. So the saints live in you as you. Mary lives in you and as you. When I lived in New York and first found Unity teachings, and we could use it here too, it's like, Hail Mary, full of grace, help me find a parking place. It was my favorite prayer.
You
And
can
it
take
worked
the Catholic
every
boy
time.
out of Catholicism, but
Oh, says the nice Jewish girl from New York.
I know.
I'm quelling here. So the consciousness that are the saints, Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, St. Christopher, Jesus of Nazareth, still exist in our consciousness and in the collective consciousness of the world. So when we pray with them, we have a way of saying it here in Unity. We say, by the power and in the consciousness of Jesus the Christ, or by the power and in the consciousness of St. Christopher, I know that nothing is lost in spirit. And therefore, it is made clear where it is to me. Right? And so that consciousness shifts you. Our prayers don't change the world. Who do our prayers change? Us. Us. So when we pray to an external deity, what we're doing is invoking that higher deity within ourselves. Would you agree? Or yes, and?
Yes, and. So our prayer practice, as Ken pointed out, is very specific in that it is about activating our consciousness, right? Up-leveling our understanding of who we are. And I'm going to open this up and say we don't know what else is possible. Mm-hmm. There's infinite potential. There's infinite possibilities out there. So Unity's official stance on angels is, what do you think? Right? Not in that it's a petitionary relationship, though. I want to be really clear about that. It's not about petitioning something to come and help you that is outside of you. What we ultimately believe is that there is one thing, and that we are not separate from that. So if on some alternative dimension that we don't know or don't understand, there is some higher level of consciousness that we in the past maybe have identified as angel, right? Is everyone with me here? That we created that understanding. We created it out of something. So ultimately, it is still ours because there's only one thing happening. Yes?
Okay. Thank you. All right, next question. Yes, Francine, and then Frank.
What is consciousness?
Great question. So consciousness is the ability to, or the inability, to have awareness of other and self. So consciousness is the thinking, the processing part of our brains, of our hearts. It's together, it's not separate. Consciousness is not just a brain activity. Thinking might be a brain activity, but consciousness I like to think of and describe as more of an energetic field of being. So consciousness takes life experience, gives it meaning, and then reflects it back out. So we have an experience, we have a feeling around some incident, we then label it when we see it again, or something reminds us of again, or you look just like my mom right now, right? And that consciousness, we may have a reaction unconsciously, but we have a thought and an emotional reaction. So consciousness includes thinking, it includes feelings, it includes subconscious and conscious thought. So it is more holistic than just thinking, if that makes sense.
Yes, and so the sum total of all of that is greater than its parts, right? The sum total of all of that becomes something that is larger than just one of those things in isolation. And that is consciousness with capital C, the consciousness. So we believe in unity, that God is omniscient, not omniscient, omniscience. God is all consciousness, everything, everywhere present. So when we're talking about God as consciousness, which is what we believe here in unity, we're talking about it being the sum total of our human experience and our human rational thought, of our emotional experience in time and in space, and we're talking about something that transcends all of that simultaneously.
Right. And when we can tap into a larger consciousness than ourselves, that's when we can contact the saints. That's when we're in contact with angels. When we're not just in limited one individual consciousness, when we're in the collective consciousness. Yes, that the angels come through. My little son just woke up and smiled at me. It's like that kind of consciousness. And you can watch it in infants. They become aware, right? They become aware of themselves. And in child development, they don't see themselves as separate from us. Then they realize that they are separate. And the ultimate, where that's why you're all here, is to realize, to transcend all that and include and realize that we're not separate again. And we're still individuals. So we're both at the same time.
And I think for me personally, when I think of consciousness, I'm thinking of the very blueprint of all that there is. Right? It is the most foundational. It's even more foundational than energy. It's more right? Energy is an expression of consciousness. Right? It is like the starting point of all that there is.
Yeah, Charles Fillmore, one of our co-founders, might have referred to it as substance.
Yes.
Right, and in his age, they would have called that the substance.
Or the ether,
yes,
I think they even
that
called it.
underlies all manifestation. Well, mind, idea, action is the unity trinity. That as we think, we create our world. The third principle that DeeAnn illustrated earlier is that in consciousness we create first, right? We can't make that blouse until someone thinks about that blouse and says, oh, it should be this color. It should have a zipper on this. It should put a zipper where a zipper shouldn't go. That's, and then makes a version of blouse, right? That is specific and manifest, but it comes from consciousness first. Okay. Frank.
Does unity have a teaching about the afterlife? I've always wondered if there is, some kind of a teaching or belief system about that.
Mm-hmm. You want to go first on this one?
So
I can go yes and?
Yes. So Charles Fillmore, so unity is a Christian perspective on the Hindu Vedics, right? That's what unity is. And so Charles Fillmore, who studied the Hindu wisdom teachings, believed fervently in reincarnation.
Yeah.
He absolutely believed in reincarnation. He believed that that was part of what our journey in our soul's expression was about, that we continue to come back through in the awareness of growing our Christness. So his personal belief was very similar to that. This realm here in this question is similar to the angels in that, yes, that is what Charles Fillmore believed, but he continually threw that back to people and said, what do you believe? And I think that that's our most important teaching, is that we are a practical spirituality, that this is about what will support you in your life's journey, in your understanding. I call it, what do you believe, what's your personal cosmology? And if your personal cosmology feels better with reincarnation because it allows you to show up as your most full, most complete, most committed, most evolving self, go for it, right? If it somehow hinders you, if it somehow means that you don't think you need to really do much this time around because you're coming back around the next time around, then maybe it doesn't serve you.
Yeah. Yeah. So Paul Hasselbeck, Reverend Paul Hasselbeck, who comes here annually almost, we don't have him scheduled right now, but next time he comes, he has the chapter on reincarnation that Charles Fillmore wrote that they have exercised from some of the Unity books. Paul went to the archives and pulled it out and has it as part of his teaching. So I'll make sure we do a seminar on it, on the idea of unity and reincarnation. And while we have no other specific teaching about afterlife, we do teach that life is eternal, right? And eternal in the unity concept means that we were in consciousness, in beingness, before these bodies, and we will be after these bodies. So that this body is just the temporary vehicle that we inhabit. So after we transition from this body, we let go of the veil of separation. And in that moment, I realized that I am always here, and that the people we love and that we miss, and the people that are connected to our heart haven't gone anywhere. They're right here within us, and they're right here next to us. My personal experience of that is that when I need them and I allow them, they're right here answering my questions, sharing their wisdom with me again, right? And while it's physically and emotionally painful not to have them here, they are. There's a duality of both and to that moment. So yeah, St. Christopher, if you adore him, is right here with you. And so the unity perspective on eternity for me is really important to understand. There's no heaven, there's not a place we go to, there's no destination. We just become one. We let go of the illusion that Frank exists, that Reverend Ken, the saint, can exist, right? We can let go of that one really easy and quick. My husband's saying yes. So we have a question over here, and then JD, and then Heather. Okay, 3. So, question.
Hi, I just want to add to, this is Regina.
Hi, Regina.
What you said about, you were leading to that heaven is a state of consciousness. Yeah. And we find it when we first seek the kingdom within. But I also wanted to go back a little, and if you want to check out Fillmore's Keep It True Lent, he's got a chapter on reincarnation, and it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
Dated, but you can see past it, and you can always look through in the Revealing Word or Metaphysical Dictionary to get the metaphysical meaning and get past some of the dated language. But it's really beautiful, talking about how unity lets go of thoughts, negative thinking rather than things. But also, I grew up with unity, so I just love it. Anyway, Charles also believed in regeneration, right? And he thought someday we wouldn't have to. We would not lose these bodies. We would become so enlightened. Of course, he saw never-ending possibilities, which is, another master teacher for us. But I always was brought to believe that angels are like divine ideas, and when we're open to them, when we get quiet, that's when they show up. And I thought that that's what I remembered angels as being, divine ideas, but I could be wrong. Maybe the fish were divine ideas as well.
Yeah, they were in metaphysical. So people who don't understand, Charles wrote with a bunch of other scholars in the 19 teens, 20s, wrote something called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, which is a thick volume of interpretation and Charles's and others' metaphysical interpretation of certain terms. And when Unity first founded, you could look up terms in the Bible according to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary or the Revealing Word. We actually don't teach that anymore. We can use it as a resource, but there is no one metaphysical interpretation of anything. Each one of us here can read the same scripture and have our own metaphysical interpretation of it. So when we went through school, I don't know if they're still doing it, but when I went through school, we were taught, it's like, what is a metaphysical interpretation of that scripture?
Not
and
the metaphysical
There's no
interpretation.
because we don't want to be locked, because consciousness is always evolving, and we are always evolving, so that as we come to a different stage or a different place in our life, we may have a different interpretation of the same piece of scripture.
And the personalized, this is for me why this teaching is so powerful, is because we believe in the personalized realization of the Christ, Buddha, that you are. Yours, you, uniquely you. So the generic understanding of a passage may or may not speak to you, but your own personal journey into what that means. What are angels to you? What does that mean to you? Taking that into your meditation, taking that, beginning the process of unveiling for yourself the meaning of something is the journey that we are all on. Like, that is how we grow and how we evolve. So it's less now about here's the answer to the question, and it's more here's the question. Yay.
Yay.
And here's another question. Yay. Right? That's really the perspective and the angle that the teaching has moved.
Great. Thank you.
Since there is only one thing happening and we're all part of it, why is there such disparity among people in our society and throughout the world?
Well, thank you. It's a great
Thank
question.
you, Kate.
I don't think we said that there's only one thing happening. There's only one power and one presence, but there's not only one thing happening. Each of us are part of that one, and we are each thinking that we are separate. So in that oneness, we all have free will. And so we think, JD's next, and then Heather, and then the Wets. We have to cut it off because we're over time already. Sorry, I was catching Tyler pointing. So in the oneness, we all have free will. So I can know that I'm one with you, and then in a second, because you said something that triggered something in my consciousness, in my being, I can be screaming at you the next. I hope that never happens in our relationship, but it is possible in the human race and in the human form that we think ourselves separate, and we believe it so much that we think we have to defend. We think we have to protect. We think that there is something outside of us attacking us. And that thought is the cause of all evil.
So regardless of how we're using this mind idea expression that Ken was speaking to, the way that we are the creative expression of the divine, regardless of how we use it, we are all using it.
Yes.
So are you using it in the awareness, which is what we teach here, grounding ourselves in affirmative prayer, grounding ourselves in meditation, so that we are moving from that awareness of one, right? Seeing those spaces, places within us where we are perhaps resistant or pushing away or fighting against, and transforming that for ourselves. And as we do that, individually, collectively, we literally can then change the world, and those disparities, those seeming differences begin to shift, begin to change.
Yeah. JD?
So, about this commitment to not make the bed in the morning.
But somehow it always gets made.
Well done. Well done. No, on a more serious note, for those who haven't seen last week's sermon, you can catch up. I'm curious with the two of you how you sustain your journey here, and particularly what I'm curious about with the amount of ups and downs and ins and outs with the potential of a new building and then not, and the potential and then not. the two of you seem to keep a higher watch, a higher conversation for us. And how do you sustain that when it's frustrating or disappointing, or you think it's solved and then it's not?
Well, we have each other. And literally, we can go into my office, close the door, and just dump, and then remember, right? To acknowledge our human exasperation with the situation or ourselves or our own shortcomings, and then be able to help each other reset. My greatest example of that is, for a lot of you don't know this story, but Roma, who you saw running around here earlier, before we had Roma, we had matched with another birth mother, and we had named the baby that was coming to us Roma as well. And 2 weeks before the baby was due, I was working at Unity of Fremont at the time, and you were at Unity of Berkeley. And we got a call, I remember clearly was driving to work, from the adoption agency saying the birth mother had changed her mind. And then the whole thing was off. And we had spent money, we had supported the woman, and we were just, I was spinning in the pain and the disappointment. And I was on the phone with DeeAnn immediately after. I got to my office and called her, and she reminded me that good given in the world is never lost. That we gave the money and we gave the intention to the world in appreciation of children, and that good that we gave to help this mother and this family would come back to us. Within a year, a woman had called us, and she and her husband conceived a child of their own to hand to us. And that's Roma, who runs around here saying, again. And that her reminder for a principle I knew was, because I couldn't see it in my pain at the moment, was really great help. And that's why she's my rock and my friend, and why she's here with us, because we can't, sometimes we're in the midst of it, see it. And that's why you have to have a spiritual mate, right? A spiritual partner. This is my spiritual wife.
Yeah. We laugh about that. And it's funny too, because people here who have prayer partners, it's why we are so clear here about having prayer partners, about having people that you connect with over time, because that is a place where you get to just show up in your authenticness, whatever that is. You get to just show up in it. No judgment, no why aren't you, that's not very ministerial of you, which my wife will sometimes say to me. With love, but she will say that to me, like, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right? And I'll be like, "Argh." So we all have those moments, and for me, it really is about sacred community. This is where we lean into. This is when my friend Joe passed away in January. I was held by this community, and the gift of that was that I could just let it go. I could just be in my grief. I could just be sad and angry and missing him, and I could have all of that humanness because I knew I was being held in something that was going to support me even when I couldn't support myself. So that as that moved through me, because it all does, right? Our emotions are all that stuff that feels so alive and so hard and so, the ups and downs of it. It all moves. It's always going to change. Yeah. It's always changing. So as that began to shift and change, I could find my feet again because the place for them was being held by others. And I could feel people sort of guiding me back down to my place of strength, to my place of centeredness. So that's how we do it. And it requires we be vulnerable. Like, it does ask that we be vulnerable. It does ask that we do cry. It does ask that we are honest about where we really are. We don't bypass
We
in
know
this
spiritual
community,
bypass. Yeah.
right? We don't work around it.
But it's a both and. It's a yes and in that too, because we also have the privilege of having job titles that require that we do rise to the occasion, right? But that's possible for all of you. I'm sitting around looking at all the prayers chaplain stoles on. And there's also commitments you make to your spiritual development, that your own commitment to how you're going to show up in the world, and this Rev thing before our names, right, sets a bar for how you're going to show up. And even when you can't, you know what the goal is. And so then you ask for help to get to the goal.
I mean, this is
yeah.
about who do you want to be in the world? Who do I want to be in the world? And when I forget or when I feel like I can't, there's so many places and ways that I can be supported to, like, remember. So we don't have to do it alone. That's huge, I think.
Yeah. And Heather gets to ask the last question.
My question is, how can we communicate effectively with people who have different beliefs, besides, like, family members, you know, besides just not bringing them up? You know, because you were talking earlier about unity beliefs, this and that, but we don't want to raise that as something that separates us.
Right.
You know, how can we build bridges?
It's a great question.
It's fabulous. And sometimes I have failed at that miserably, right? But from my retreat I just got off of too, what I was really reminded of, something that I know but needed to hear again, was listening. And real listening is not being with someone else, formulating your answer to them while they talk, right? Real listening is being with them and trying to really understand what they're saying and asking them more questions about what they believe and why. And that kind of capital for those kind of difficult conversations is crucial. I had one with my father. I, pushed every button on my body this summer, and it went really horribly awry. My fault, my bad. And Friday, I had a conversation with him on the phone where we got to really talk and process some more of that. And it was so amazing to hear him. For the first time in my life, through that process, which has been ongoing for months, he said to me, "You know what? I realized something. I realized I was looking at it, and I treated you harder and harsher than I treated any of the other children. I didn't know who you were, what you were about. I really messed it up." Now, I've waited a long time to hear those words, right? And they were so, when I heard them, I was just like, "Oh, Dad, I know you're doing the best you could, and I love you." And it was a real connection. So sometimes it doesn't happen instantly. Sometimes it's the investment in that dialogue and that willingness to let them find it, because there's nothing more valuable than when they have it. I can say all this, I can say all this, I can say all this. When you know it and say it to me, it's like, right? And so that kind of listening and investment and time is just crucial. And there is no time in spirit, right?
And
when it happens, it happens, and then it's all different. Yeah.
And I think also letting go of our expectation that somehow that particular person or situation or individual, that they are going to be able to see us, right, in the way we wish to be seen. And that when we can let go of our expectation of it, then all of a sudden we are creating space to really be with what's actually happening. And we're not being in reaction to it. When I shared with my family, a nice Jewish girl, right? And all of a sudden I'm in a teaching that talks about the Christ that we are, and talks about Jesus, and whoo, boy, that was a challenge for members of my family and my community. It was hard in some way, right? And all I kept thinking to myself was, it's okay if they can't hear what I'm saying. It didn't matter how much I said it's about consciousness and the Christ consciousness, all they were hearing was Christ, 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 right?
Jesus
that was
Christ.
all they were able, Jesus Christ, you know. I had somebody tell me, oh, you're just like Jews for Jesus. It's like, wow. Right? Like, wow. Because it's not like, wow, like that's their filter. That's what they're capable of listening. And so instead of trying to fight them on that, right? Again, it's about questions like, wow, that's really interesting. Why do you feel that? What is it about this that's what has come up for you? And again, it's hard sometimes because we get defensive and we get reactive, like, why don't you understand what I'm trying to say? The other thing I will say is, having served in hospital chaplaincy and having prayed with people from every single faith tradition, from atheists to non-believers, to like been with people of every single faith tradition, ultimately, I really do believe we're talking about the same thing. That the trappings of it, the structure of it, the system, the cosmology that people might have is radically different. But that ultimately we're all speaking around, about, pointing towards the same exact thing. And so that for me has been very helpful. As I listen to people, you know, and they're asking me to pray for them as, let Jesus Christ come down and heal me. And I'm like, all right, let's do it, right? It's not my personal faith tradition, but I can meet you there because I know what I mean for me when I'm speaking about that, right? I know how it lives in me. And I don't need to convince them of anything, right? I just want to honor them the way I want to be honored. So it's a mirror.
Thank you, Heather. It's a great question.
Yeah, great question.
So I'm going to call an audible because it is now.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah. You and I talked a lot? Huh. What's the chances of that? So we're going to skip the meditation. We're going to use the daily word as our meditation. But breathe into that, and we'll have a prayer, and we're going to go to the offering after this, okay?